in the interest. Thanks everybody for joining us for the May 2022 meeting of the CLOTT 3 group. As a reminder, these are all recorded. So if there's people at your site that are not on the call and they want to watch this, Lizette puts them up on the website later on. Just a reminder of the sites that Lizette's showing us, and then where we wanted to start is just with the milestones. And we keep putting these up there again and again and again, because as you know, we have to report back to PCORI every 6 months on where we are on our status of our milestones. So here's an overview of what's been going on. We had our meeting with PCORI, I would say maybe about a month ago. I don't remember if it was right before or right after our last meeting. But we had a group meeting between the center staff, the Hopkins group, as well as PCORI, to kind of just give them a feel of where we are for the milestones for the whole project. And they totally understand that we have certainly encountered a bunch of major delays. And they understand that we've overcome some of them, but they're really pushing us that we do have to get some of this work more underway more quickly. I'll just go with that. So as Lizette is showing us here, we're done with all the, I'll call it the paperwork, the subcontracts, the approvals, the data use agreements, et cetera, some of the data analyses pieces. We've certainly done a lot of the nurse education module training, and we'll look at what that looks like. Where we are right now, and we're going to talk about it again a couple times, is the pre-data, as well as the getting the alert actually built so we can actually go ahead and turn this thing on. So just as a reminder of the timeline, this was originally supposed to be a 2-year project and was funded for 2 years. We've already talked to PCORI about the plan for basically a no-cost extension to take this out over a longer period of time. The funding date originally, as of now, is supposed to end in the fall. August, last day of August is the end date. That's 2 years, if you can believe it. So we've already told them ahead of time we're going to need another year of no-cost extension time, and they're on board with that in theory, although obviously we'll have to fill out all the paperwork as well. So this gives you an idea of where we are. So where we really need to move is alert and registry data, and then actually get the thing up and running at the different places. So with that, I think it's probably worth us just moving ahead to the the next steps, unless there are any questions from any of the groups about these issues of the general milestones. Okay. So seeing none, we're going to plow ahead. And the first piece that we're going to talk about is the medication list and the data piece. So I saw Brandon on. Brandon, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk over the next couple of slides to kind of make sure everybody knows where we are and what we're doing.
Yeah, so since the last call, we've had a few one-on-one meetings with a few sites. But as a reminder, the steps for building the data model and then the real-time alert sort of need to be done in these steps of identifying exactly what medication regimens your hospital uses for VTE prophylaxis and coming up with a comprehensive list of how it gets documented in the EHR. It's not as straightforward as just saying heparin 5,000 3 times a day. How it gets documented in the EHR is very different by site and can be documented multiple different ways. So you'd want to be able to go through and capture every potential regimen. Once you've gone through that medication list development, you want to generate some preliminary data to validate the list that you're looking at. Once you've validated, we're asking you to pull 2 years of pre-implementation data and share with us. This is the data that will evaluate improvements in VTE prophylaxis medication administration. And then we want to ask you to send that every 3 months thereafter as part of the project goes on. But one of the reasons why this is such an important step is that this is the information that you're going to be using to build your alert. You need to know exactly what VT prophylaxis medications to trigger an alert on for when it's not administered. So there's a lot of prep work that goes into this to make sure that you have the most reliable data possible. Moving on to the next. Thus far, we've spoken with many different sites in terms of completing the medication list, and we're certainly open to trying to figure out how can we help anyone else with these steps. Thus far, we've only received data regarding the VT prophylaxis registry from 2 sites.
Zach, can you go to the next? Thanks. Yeah, this is the piece, and I'm just going to reiterate what Brandon said. You know, the data, we have to get the data. We have to make sure the data is right before you can build the alert. And, you know, we've got the med list for most of the places. We've got our last few we have to work on. But this is the piece where we are right now. Like, we really need to see what the data looks like, make sure it's working right, make sure we're able to get data submitted from your site to us at Hopkins, so Brandon can actually look at the data and make sure it's right, make sure it's in the right format, and make sure we can link between the registry data and the missed dose data from the EMR. So as of now, this is what the data looks like. There are places that have given us some, but we really need to move this part forward. Questions or comments about the data, or, you know, steps along the way, the medication list? I know we've had a few meetings here and there with the last 2 sites, and I think we need to reprioritize meetings with them, and Lizette, we can work on those to make those happen sooner rather than later.
Hey, Dr. Howard, it's Joanne Miller from Lancaster General. I was able to send Brandon data pre. Does this mean that it's been accepted? I wasn't sure if I heard back or not, because I had to use a special software to send them the data.
Yes, we did receive your data, and we were able to access through the site that you set up for us.
Perfect. All right. If you have any questions, just let me know.
And
Definitely.
what I'll add on is, you know, we have set up a data transfer piece, and Brandon has set up files on, or a site on our end to be able to receive the data. And you should have, your data person should already have a link to do that. If that is not workable and isn't going to happen for your site because of, you know, logistics of any sort of technical reasons, please reach out to Lizette, Brandon, and we can figure out another way to get the data. That's exactly what we ended up having to do with Lancaster, and it did work out. But if you've got a different way that you routinely share data with other people that is HIPAA compliant, that we can get a hold of the data, you know, we can certainly work around things like that. Brandon, anything you want to add on to that?
No, we're happy to work around whatever works for you in that regard.
Lisa Knowlton from Stanford here. One question that came up for us is, you know, I'm sure other centers have a similar situation, is we have some of this data captured already in our trauma registry, but then things, you know, like timing of the administration and who gave it, you know, some of the details. Have the sites that have successfully provided data, are they building in some of those variables going forward into their registry in order to make the data pull a little more streamlined, or are you looping in, you know, your Epic teams? How's that working?
I'll take a first general crack at it, as not the informaticist who's doing it. But in general, what we've asked is, you know, the trauma registry, we're not asking you to build anything extra into your trauma registry. It's great if there is data, and we're going to talk about one other item, but if there's a CSN number, which is, you know, a contact, you know, an admission specific number, which is different than a medical record number. And what we in general are asking is, that's one data set, which should be very easy. You guys routinely pull data from your registry for all other things. So that's one piece. And then the second piece is that missed dose data pull, really is a direct pull out of Epic or, you know, the one Cerner site, but it's a direct data pull. And we've kind of come up with some general ideas of what that data looks like. It's in the data, some of the data files or data explanation files that Lizette can reshare. They're on the website that remind people of, you know, these are the elements that come in the registry, and then these are the separate elements that you need to ask your Epic report writers to pull a report for all of these data. So I think, and then what we've done is we've decided we're going to aggregate that and pull it all together on the back end when you send us the 2 data fields. So for example, you can see at Christiana, they've sent us both the data from their registry and then the data from the missed doses. And then Brandon's going to work to link them by their encounter number to know which Mr. Smith in the registry is the same Mr. Smith as in the EHR data pool. Lisa, does that explain?
That's super helpful. Yeah, that's
Perfect.
great. Thanks.
Brandon, is there any other, technical pieces that you think would be helpful to explain to people? Or, I think that document that we've shared around it, and maybe it's just worth resending Lizette, and I can work on that for Lizette to send it around to everybody again to show these are the elements and these are where they're from, would be really useful. Brandon, anything else to add on?
No, I think that made sense to me, but if other people have questions, I think we'd be happy to take.
Hey, Brandon and Ellie, I just have a comment. Unfortunately, we ran the first initiation of this data poll, and the results were just not, they were incomplete and in some points incoherent. And so our kind of data team, I think Sam is arranging another meeting right now, because I think it created, at least the code they ran to pull this data was not successful. So I think what we need, at least we have that information of what didn't work in terms of moving forward, but we may need to, our technical team might need to meet again.
And is that for the missed dose data or the registry data?
I think it was the missed dose data.
Perfect. Because what I was going to say is, I think the registry data, and trust me, I've been on the other side of this, the registry data should be easy.
Yeah.
So where it says like all these empty columns for complete, like I think pulling registry data for 2 years worth of data should be relatively simple. And if we could get that part started so we don't have to wait for it, because I think that is an easier ask, then I would know like the data management, the data sharing is working. Your point about pulling the data from Epic, we understand that is the much harder part. It would be awesome if we could just give you a cut and paste here, run this query. That's what I was hoping for, but unfortunately that's not how Epic is built, and it is not quite as easy to share it that way. We can certainly meet again and have you meet with our Epic report writers. We can give you some of the data. I know Brandon has access to some of the code for doing some of this to be able to share that piece. But yeah, whatever we need to do to help you with that second column. The first column should be very easy. And the second column should be, we know it's a little harder.
Yeah, the only the limitations of the registry, and I'm going to try to redouble the efforts there to make sure it's submitted, is that we had a series of manpower shortages in the registry department, which are already behind. And so we're a few people down, and so we're actively hiring, but we'll try to prioritize this.
And I appreciate it. Trust me, Michelle Price knows this story very well from CLOTT 1. I was the last one to get started. My registry was at the time 8 months behind. And I went to the trauma director and said, hey, I'm going to have to give back some money. Well, because, they paid us to do this thing and now we're unable to do it. And my trauma director was able to help prioritize, a certain patient population for CLOTT 1 to get those things done in time for pieces that we needed.
That's good. That's good negotiation advice.
I think it is a piece, because trust me, and I was asking around, and I had 16 other people who were co-eyes on that project. All of you were included. It's really hard when I was the one, and you have to rely on the registry, which is not a research thing, to do this funded research part. It's a hard piece. I totally understand your point. So I think even if you give us an idea of, hey, what does it look like so far? how far behind you think you are. I know we did this, informally, Michelle. I don't know if you have any of those numbers, but I remember some of the registries were, some were a month behind, some were 6 months behind, et cetera.
It was all over the place. Yep.
So, I mean, it's, obviously we try your best, keep working on it. We know that not all the registries are as up to date as others. And trust me, I've been in that situation.
Thanks. I get it. I understand. Thanks.
But I think, having the data, I mean, the pre-data was even, let's see, 2019, 2020 is the pre-data we were asking for. Brandon, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't have it right in front of me.
2019, 2020, and then we'll probably be asking for 2021 just because the delay in implementation.
Yeah, but the original plan of 2019 and 2020, I mean, my registry has been behind for a very long time. Hopefully by now, especially because places are doing TQIP, submitting data, et cetera, hopefully your 19 and 20 data are all done. So if we could work on that piece of it, and then, as we said, if you need help with building the data pool for Epic, that's where Brandon can meet one-on-one, email back and forth. We can make those connections and make that part happen. Okay. Any other data questions? Okay, so let's switch over to the real-time alert. So, you need to have your data to be able to do your alert and build it. We've got, 2 centers that now have the data pool ready to go and have made much progress, but have not yet been able to 100% turn the alert on and ready to go. So we've met one-on-one with many of the sites. Christiana and Lancaster are now in the race for who's going to be able to turn it on first. I will turn it over to them if there's any update on anything new. I see Annie and I heard Joanna on here. If there's any update from either one of those sites about where you are or what your last little hurdle is, it might be helpful for the group to hear.
This is Joanne from Lancaster. We're very, very close, but this past weekend we had an epic upgrade. So all the work stops when there's an epic upgrade. So I emailed the team this morning to make sure everything went okay, and I haven't heard back yet. I think they're still wrapping up some of the upgrade concerns that were identified. So we're very close for Epic to send out a notification of a missed dose. So very close. I'll update you as soon as we're ready to go live, because I'm almost to the point now where I kind of have to do some re-education of the nurses, because it's been a while since we've educated them. They've done their modules, but I will have to do some going to huddles and re-educating soon. So, because it's just been a long time for us, because we had some concerns about how we do that electronic notification. So that's where we're at.
Perfect. And I'm going to hold that thought about re-educating nurses like right when it's about to roll out. We are going to talk about that later. So I promise to come back to that comment you made, because I think it's really important. But I do want to finish up the real-time alert discussion first. So that sounds great. Thank you guys for pushing ahead. We all know that an Epic upgrade is not always as much of an upgrade as you think it is. So thank you for that. Anything from the Christiana side? I know you guys were getting close as well.
We're just waiting for Cerner to build a task for the nurses still, which hopefully will be done soon.
Okay. Yeah, so then, hopefully those are the 2 that are the closest. If there's anyone else who's on here that's making some progress and wants to share, I'd love to hear it, and it might be helpful for the rest of the group as well. So I think this is just the reminder spot for, in parallel, we're working on the data pull and making sure the data is right, but also be working with your Epic builders to be building this alert. Different places, Christiana is going to have it go directly to a phone. And that's kind of, the thing that we would love to see happen if possible, but I know other places have maybe some alternative options. So we're still trying to see what that's going to look like. Any other comments, questions on the alert piece? Okay, moving ahead. Next slide, Lizette. So there were a few pieces that have come up in discussions and emails and back and forth. So we're going to get an email later this week. We're going to get it out to you to ask a few specific questions. The first of which is, this topic of COVID and what people use for VT prophylaxis in COVID patients really actually affects this data. So for example, if your routine for trauma patients is, 30 milligrams of Lovenox, twice a day, we know that's prophylaxis. In COVID times, it might be very different, especially as some people are suggesting full dose anticoagulation, et cetera, for certain patient populations. So this question, well, do we know if the patient did or didn't have COVID? So we're going to ask to try to figure that piece out. I know some trauma registries have added that in. So if you have that data on, Elliot Hout was admitted to the trauma service and he had active COVID during that admission. If you have that data in your registry, that's great. And we're going to ask if it's in there or not. And then the second piece would be is if it's not, we're going to see about adding that into your data pull from Epic for the other piece directly out of the EMR. So we're going to talk about that specific question. You'll hear a little bit more about that. We've related to that is also, each center, as they're starting to give us some of the data, I'm not going to say it's all over the place, but each center does things a little bit differently. I don't know who was available for the VT conference we held. I guess it was 2 weeks ago now. And there's large variation. Some people are varying dose by weight. Some people are varying dose by anti-10A. Some people are varying it by TEG. Some people are not doing any of those things. So we're going to ask, what is your standard? What's your protocol? And if you can send us a copy of that protocol so we can have a feel for what you're doing routinely on the trauma patients. So that'll be another ask. And then this other topic came up as it relates to the nurse education. And some places are still having a little bit of difficult time getting nurses to do the online education. You'll see what the data looks like in a few minutes. But this question of, I wonder if some of those places have nurse unions, because that was a topic of discussion of who are they paying the nurses to do this? Is this on, company time while they're being paid to work? Or is this on their extra volunteer time on a non-clinical time? So we're going to ask just a little bit of questions about some of these topics. Are there any questions, comments people want to say or ask about these three things as we're going to get out and ask about each one of them? Kind of didn't think so, but you'll hear a little bit more from us just to make sure. And I think a lot of these are relatively quick, easy answers. Okay. So we're going to switch gears again. I think we talked about the real-time alert already, but I think it's just worth re-emphasizing what the options are for this alert. What does this look like? There is an Excel spreadsheet. So when you're talking to your team about building it, there's some very specific questions and comments of how that's going to work. If you want us to be on some of those calls, I've been on some, Brandon's been on some, Peggy, Doreen, et cetera. So feel free to reach out to us and make sure you're looking at that Excel spreadsheet to make sure you're asking the right questions of what the alert is going to look like, how it's going to be delivered, where it's going to be delivered. And then this last piece, number 3, is actually really important of, okay, now there's an alert. Who does this intervention? Who's actually going to be doing the intervention with the clinical nurse at the bedside and or the patient? So it's really important to have a plan for all those pieces. And before we turn anybody's alert on, we're going to want to make sure we have a meeting with your site to make sure and go over, we've got a plan for all these different things. The meeting with Christiana was great. And we had a few different questions back and forth that they were then able to answer to us. And now we're just waiting on the technical piece. But I think it's really, really important to get these meetings going, to get the technical side going, but also the non-technical, who's going to be doing this. And when we met with Christiana, it wasn't just, the trauma program manager and the trauma surgeon. It was actually the nurse manager of the floor to make sure that they know how it's actually going to happen. So you really do need to integrate the full team as you're discussing this. Questions, comments on this topic? And what we'll plan to do is we can send, obviously the slides go out again, everyone can take a look at it, and we're gonna do some follow-up with Lizette with some of these issues and questions. So moving ahead, we're moving on to the nurse education module. If you can show us the data on that. So here's where we are total. Our goal at each site and our overall is 80%. We're now at 68% overall. We have 900 nurses who've done this online education. 6 of the sites are in the green at the 80% mark or higher. There are 4 sites that are not quite there yet. A couple of them are getting closer. Wisconsin's almost there. I think 10 more people between 10 more people is going to get it to Wisconsin. South Carolina's got about 20 more to go. Maryland and San Francisco still have a little bit more numbers. So just keep pushing ahead with those. Whatever we can do to help you, tell us. We think this is now the right data, that we're pulling it correctly and we're able to give you back the data for it. If you still think there's data issues, Lizette and Ashley can certainly help with it. But we're overall moving in the right direction. And when we showed this data to PCORI, they were very happy to see, just the overall numbers were that high, and to see a bunch of the sites were already at the mark. But they also really wanted to say, hey, what's up with these last few sites? How are we going to get them over the top? So that's where we are. We're moving ahead. I don't think there's much else to talk about the nurse education unless people have things they want to bring up. And just a reminder, so the materials should be one of the easier parts. They're ready to go. You should already have all these different things for when you're ready to go with the rollout, the badge cards, the posters, the postcards with the QR code, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If for some reason you don't, Lizette can certainly get it to you, but I think this part, this should not be a holdup. This should not be a holdup for anybody. So just a reminder, I put this in on every slide deck. This is what the bundle looks like. It's that face-to-face conversation with the paper materials and the video. So it's just an important thing to remember as you're starting to plan for your eventual rollout. How do you want to do these paper materials? Are you going to be doing it on 1 or 2 floors and you can just print a big stack and have it ready to go? That's perfect. If you're going to have the nurses go to a certain place and print on demand, just make sure they know how to do that and the printers are going to work, et cetera. And then the same question about the video. We, in the original project, we physically handed the patient an iPad to watch the video. Now we have the availability to either put it into your Epic MyChart bedside or on your TV screens in your hospital or on their own device using a link right to the YouTube video for it. But we just need to know how you're actually plan to do that. So when you're going out and telling the nurses, okay, show the video, they know exactly the steps to make that happen. So just a reminder here for that. And then the next slide is the peer coaching. So this goes back to the discussion from Joanne at Lancaster. When you're ready to actually get this project up and running for real, so the alert is ready and you're going to turn it on and it's going to start going out to people, that's when this time with Doreen is going to be critical. So Doreen's already started talking to some of the sites one-on-one, but then as your site is getting closer, Doreen would be happy to, and we really want Doreen to be involved in this, whether it's online or whether it's in person. Lancaster's only an hour away from Baltimore, and we have time, Doreen's time planned to come either in person or remotely to the sites to come to huddles, staff meetings, change of shift, whatever the right place is you need to tell us, and then Doreen can show up there either in person or virtually. There's that brief 8-minute video that's great for the frontline nurses to see about, it's not the patient education material, it's how as a nurse do you do this intervention. So some places have decided they're going to send that out to all of their nurses to watch ahead of time and then meet as a group to discuss it or go over it or ask Q&A, et cetera. But as you plan to roll this out, and Joanne, this is the thing I was promised to come back to, it's really important to include Doreen in those discussions and how can she help with those huddles and everything like that. So, I tell people all the time, Doreen has done this intervention for literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of nurses and patients.
We sure will. Thank you.
Sure. And then the same thing as we've already talked to Christiana about the same thing. Christiana and Lancaster are going to be much more in person just because of the close proximity. It's hard to drive out to San Diego or Wisconsin for like an hour or two meeting though. So those things we certainly have plans for virtual. Okay. We're doing great on this Delphi. Thank you all for sending this out. If you could show the data on that next slide. Yeah, so we are at, and we have a few more since then. I think we're at 180 people. The sites are really doing well. Everybody except for 2 sites are in double digits. I know I re-asked those couple sites. It'd be great if all the places could get a few more. We are deciding we're going to close this round 1 down soon. We decided to leave it open during this week if anybody is able to send out a last big push to their trauma surgeons as well as their non-trauma surgeons, ortho, neurosurgery, critical care, et cetera, just to get a little bit more feedback and a little bit more variety. So we have everybody that's given us their opinions on it. Once this round 1 is done, then we're going to be ready to send out round 2, where all the people who filled this in will be asked to come back again, look at the data and opinions of other people, maybe change their mind, change their opinion, and see where we can gain consensus on the best approach to holding versus not holding VTE prophylaxis.
Elliot, is that going to be sent out pretty quickly after the closure?
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea is going to be, honestly, we're basically ready to go. I was kind of hoping, and there's no official sample size, and we will certainly not be identifying these hospitals in the paper, but it would be nice, even in a de-identified way, to be able to say, hey, look, the range of people from each site ranged from, right now it's 7 to 41. It'd be great if all the sites could be up at double digits. I was hoping for a few more. And then that second round is going to be sent out again. And you go to the website and it's going to walk you through how do you look at the current voting, and then are you willing to change, and what kind of consensus can we reach?
Right. And then the second round is going to be automated, right? In terms of who's filled
Correct.
it survey before.
You do not have to, once you get a person to fill it in, they have given us their email address, and we automatically via the Delphi program send them emails again. You just need to get it filled in the first time.
Yeah, I think that's great. In my experience before, sometimes if you wait too long for these second stages, you drop off your response rate.
Absolutely. And it's hard, a lot of these end up being a lot smaller panels. They have, a panel of 20 people, and it's very easy to, really push people, hey, we really need the last few people. It's a little harder with an open-ended denominator, from 11 sites. So, but I think, this topic of conversation came up at the VTE conference, like I said, a couple of weeks ago. This topic came up again and again and again. When do you hold it in patients with TBI? When do you hold it for, PEGs? Like, do you have to hold it for a trach? Do you have to hold it for ortho set? The ortho groups are saying you don't have to hold it, but then we know the ortho intern suggests it gets held. So it's these ongoing questions. And I think these data will be very, very helpful this, I think, will be one of the most impactful early papers from this CLOTT 3 project. Okay. So, we only had about a half an hour's worth of stuff. I think this is where the Q&A happens. And I would love for people, there's always some discussions going on. There's one question from Rosemary Kozer in the chat about the data pull. And you are correct. Originally, the data documents talked about 2019 to 2020. So we are going to ask, and we can update that document because it's been such a long delay in the quote unquote pre-data to ask for the 2021 data. And hopefully by now, all your registries are hopefully caught up for 2021. We can send that out and Lizette can hopefully get that information. We can get that changed. So that answers that one question. I know there's often other chat questions people want to put in, or if there's anything that people would like to ask verbally and go over any of these topics or issues. I think right now, I mean, I literally can't stress it enough. Like, we need the data. We need to make sure that we are moving ahead with the data and the data pull, and then getting ready to build the alert at each place. Lizette, Michelle, Ashley, is there anything I missed from the center side that you'd like to talk about also?
No, I think on my side, I'll just make sure that I resend an email with specific ask, and also, anything we talked about, like an Excel sheet or a document, I'll put those so they're at the top of everyone's box.
Yeah, that'd be great, because then it'll be very clear. And we know all the data or all the files are on the website, but oftentimes people forget what's the password to the website. I didn't know to go there. I appreciate sending those out again. Okay. Anything else from the Hopkins people? Doreen, I know I talked you up. Stephanie, I talked up the Delphi. Femi is making a lot of progress on the nurse survey. So we didn't want to show any of that data quite yet because, we're still getting responses, and we would like to wait for some more of the sites to get their nurses to do the education. But the overall response rate is quite high, and we're getting excited for it. So we already have a plan of exactly what that paper is going to look like, and you'll hear more about that later. Anything else on the Hopkins end that I missed?
No, just, my email and phone are out there. If anybody would like me to come or do a Zoom, feel free we can set up a time.
Perfect. So now it's open for all the sites. Are there any other questions? There was only the one question about the data and clarifying the date. So everybody feels good and they know exactly what they need to do to move on all these next steps. I'm going to take that as nobody has a question they want to ask in front of everybody. But I know the way it usually works is we get a lot of emails right afterwards. So like I said, I guess we'll end early. If you have individual specific questions, please, reach out to me, reach out to Lizette. I do want to add on one other piece that we haven't mentioned because we're not quite there yet. Peter Cronham is on the call. Peter's a qualitative researcher at Penn who's really going to drive home and help us with some interviews at the different sites about the barriers, facilitators, what's easy, what's hard to make this thing happen. We've made a conscious decision not to start doing those interviews yet. Originally, the plan was we were going to be doing them by now, but obviously you can't do the interview if you actually haven't done all the different pieces yet. So we will be telling you more about that as the sites start rolling out the full intervention about when the logistics that's going to happen. So more to come on that, but nothing to do now. Any other issues? Okay. There you go. So we're giving you back 15 minutes. Thank you all so much. And we, like I said, Lizette's going to be in touch, and we're going to keep pounding because we really need to get these things along the way. Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.